On June 2nd, 1963, 5 close friends from Portland, Oregon, all science majors in their mid-20s, set out on what they believed would be the biggest adventure of their lives. Their plan was simple: travel to Pilot Station, Alaska, then float down the Yukon River all the way to the Bering Sea. They expected the entire trip to take about 2 weeks, maybe a little longer, depending on the weather. But 3 weeks later, not a single one of them arrived at their final destination. That's when the search began. Rescuers eventually found their abandoned camp near the mouth of a Proa Pass. What they discovered there left them stunned and deeply disturbed for years afterward. Scattered among the campsite was a camera with its film missing, and a notebook that documented the group's journey. The handwriting belonged to Roger, one of the 5 friends, who investigators believe was the last one still alive when the entries were written. Oddly, none of the entries in the notebook included dates, so investigators labeled them Day 1, Day 2, and so on. Even then, there was debate about whether the order was completely accurate, since Roger didn't write every single day. Day 1. Roger describes the group sitting at the airport, waiting for their plane. None of them had ever flown before, so they were nervous, but excited. Roger admitted he never liked writing, but since he was considered the leader, he decided to record everything. He also brought his parents' camera to document the trip. They had planned this journey for a long time. Years of backcountry camping and adventures pushed them toward searching for something wilder, something deeper. And Alaska, with all its mystery, seemed perfect for that. Day 2. The group had reached Anchorage and were preparing to continue to Pilot Station the next day. The exact arrival time was uncertain, heavily dependent on Alaska's unpredictable weather. Everyone was exhausted from the initial travel, so the plan for the day was simple: grab a quick meal at a local diner called the Tasty Freeze, and then rest up for the journey ahead. Day 3 or 4. The long transit toward Pilot Station proved to be grueling. Roger admitted that he might not write again until they reached their destination. The travel had been mentally and physically draining, and sometimes he could only muster the energy to take photos if he felt up to it. Day 5. Finally, the grueling transit was behind them. The next day, their true adventure would begin. Floating down the Yukon River, Roger described the Alaskan wilderness as unlike anything he had ever imagined. The night's chilling silence was both terrifying and breathtaking. It forced him to reflect on life itself, how modern humans had forgotten the raw world from which we came. The wild, he realized, was a call some of us could never ignore. Day 6. The group spent most of the day on the river. Sylvia and Bonnie both struggled with the fear of being so far from any kind of civilization. Roger, Edward, and Harold reassured them that they were safe with the group and reminded them that there was no turning back. The only way forward was to keep moving. Each day's routine became clear: float until late afternoon or evening, then find the most suitable spot to make camp. That evening, sitting around the campfire, they shared stories of their lives, hopes, and dreams. Even after years of friendship, Roger felt as if he was seeing these people on an entirely deeper level. The connection of surviving the wilderness together seemed to forge bonds that no ordinary adventure could. Day 7. That night, Roger was awakened by Bonnie whispering to someone just outside his tent. At first, he almost called out, but the voice wasn't familiar. It was a man's voice. Fear gripped him. It wasn't Sylvia, and Edward and Harold were inside the tent with him. Roger stayed awake the rest of the night, unsure whether to tell the others. Being in the middle of nowhere, he didn't want to cause unnecessary worry or make anyone suspicious of each other. So, for now, he kept quiet. The next morning, when he casually asked Bonnie and Sylvia how they had slept, both answered, "Fine, just cold." Their tone seemed normal, giving him no reason to doubt them. Day 8. Edward was unusually quiet, staring off into nothing for most of the day. Normally, he was the one who talked the most, so his silence was unsettling. Despite that, they made good progress along the river. They considered spending an extra day on shore to explore, stretch their legs, and hike a bit before resuming the river journey. Day 9. Roger had been dreaming of home when suddenly Sylvia screamed. Something had grabbed her foot. Bonnie also screamed. The 3 men scrambled out of their tent to see that the tent flap was wide open, something that should not have happened. They asked Sylvia and Bonnie if they had untied it, and both said no. At first, Roger thought it might be an animal, but there were no rips or tears in the tent, no marks, no saliva, nothing an animal could leave behind. He started to wonder if Bonnie was hiding something. Throughout the day, he watched her closely, but her behavior seemed normal. That night, he slept with his father's gun beside him, hoping he would never need it. Day 10. While breaking camp, Roger noticed scratches on the back of Sylvia's neck, fresh, painful-looking marks. Then Bonnie suddenly tapped him on the shoulder, making him jump. A strange feeling lingered with him for the rest of the night. Day 11. After hours on the river, the group found a spot that seemed perfect to spend an extra day. Being stuck on the boat for long stretches had begun to wear on them all mentally, and stretching their legs on a hike seemed necessary. Although patches of snow still covered the ground, they were prepared for the cold. During the day, Roger noticed something unsettling. Bonnie and Sylvia kept whispering to each other, a behavior Roger had never seen before. He couldn't explain it, but it gave him an uneasy feeling, as if they were anticipating something unknown. That evening, while preparing dinner, he noticed the same fresh scratch marks on Bonnie's neck that he had seen on Sylvia's earlier. Day 12. That night, everything took a terrifying turn. When the group stepped out of their tents in the morning, they realized Bonnie and Sylvia were gone. Their tent had been slid open from the inside, as if they had tried to escape. Snow revealed a single set of footprints, barefoot, moving away from the camp. Their clothes were still inside the tent, and Bonnie's pillow was soaked with blood. But the surrounding snow was completely clean. The men followed the tracks about 400 to 500 yards downstream and discovered something horrifying. Bonnie's body lay face down in a stream at the bottom of a ravine. She had no clothes, and at first glance there were no injuries. But when Harold opened her mouth, they realized her tongue had been cut out, explaining the blood-soaked pillow. Sylvia's footprints stopped at the same spot, but she was nowhere to be seen. No other tracks were in the snow, as if she had vanished into thin air. The group was left stunned, unsure of what to do next. They carried Bonnie's body back to camp, aware that they needed help to find Sylvia, but also terrified of what might be waiting for them along the river. After returning Bonnie's body to camp, the group made a shocking discovery. Their boat was gone. Roger couldn't believe it. He remembered tying it tightly to prevent exactly this kind of situation. Yet somehow, the boat had disappeared. Snow around the site showed no new footprints, only their old tracks. The thought that someone or something was following them and taking the boat sent chills down their spines. They placed Bonnie's body under a tree, covering her with her sleeping bag, but Roger worried about wild animals being attracted to it. Most of their food had been in the boat, so starvation had now become a real threat. The group knew drastic action would be necessary if they were to survive. Day 13. That morning, Roger woke to find Edward and Harold missing. At first he assumed they had stepped outside to make breakfast, but their coats, boots, and the rest of their clothing remained inside the tent. One of Edward's socks lay on his sleeping bag, suggesting he had left wearing only one sock. Roger peeked outside and saw their barefoot tracks in the snow, uneven, confused. One track had a sock, the other was bare. Fear gripped him, but Roger forced himself to pack essential items and follow the river, determined to continue the journey despite his terror. Suddenly, he heard a man calling for help in the distance. Though paralyzed with fear, he knew he couldn't stay in the tent and do nothing. He wrote this entry in his notebook and left it behind, hoping to document the rest of the story if he survived. Roger never returned. Weeks later, a search party found the abandoned camp at a Proa Pass. The details in Roger's notebook matched the scene perfectly. The women's tent slid open from the inside, the men's tent containing the notebook and pistols, and Bonnie's body still covered by her sleeping bag under the tree. The mystery of what had happened to the group was just beginning. 4 days later, rescuers found Sylvia's body buried in a shaded ravine, likely the same ravine where Bonnie had been discovered. Her body was positioned unnaturally, upside down with her hands clasped together. Every finger was missing, cleanly sliced as if with a sharp instrument. She was barefoot and wore only a shirt and one pant leg. No other injuries were visible. Harold was found across the river, wearing only his pants. One of his eyes was missing, and his body was covered in cuts and blisters. The examining doctor concluded that his ribcage and internal organs had been crushed. Edward's body was found high in a tree in the same ravine, wearing only his underwear, with his skull clearly crushed. Roger's body was found weeks later, far from the camp, high up on the same mountain where the others were discovered. He was carefully placed under a rock ledge, arms folded as if intentionally positioned. He was barefoot and wore only thermal underwear. There were no visible injuries, but the doctor noted that his internal organs were liquefied, likely the result of extreme exposure. The group's overturned boat was found several miles downstream. The camera from camp had its film removed, and no additional film was ever recovered. Roger's notebook never mentioned whether he had taken any photos, leaving questions unanswered. Over the years, countless theories have been proposed about what happened, but nothing has been conclusively proven. Some family members of the victims retraced the route, hoping for answers, and rumors suggest they discovered something that might explain the tragedy. But the details were never disclosed. To this day, the mysterious deaths of Edward, Harold, Roger, Bonnie, and Sylvia remain one of Alaska's most chilling unsolved wilderness horrors.